Boom. Good evening. Hello, folks. Michael here.
Rupert here. Nice to see you.
Welcome to another Prehistory Guys Cure question time. Welcome if you've not been with us before. I see from the comments from the chat that a good many of the usual suspects are already with us, and thank you as always for being there and being such a just a great support by being up and ready for this. I see that we've got one thumb down already. I don't know because that was before we started. Vote of confidence. But Tim's here, Ernie's here, Faye's here, Gutsy Sue's here, Ernie's here, Dorman's here, Virginia's here, Michael's here, Michael Darby, Sibylla's here, Tim Pearson's here, saying hello from Cornwall. And good point, if you've not been with us before, please do say who you are in the chat, say where you're from. Yeah. We'd be delighted, of course, to see new names joining us. So what we got coming up tonight, Rupert? Oh, and also please do let us know if you can hear us right, if the levels are right, any tech stuff, please give us feedback.
We've got some cracking questions tonight.
Yeah.
Actually, haven't we? We've got some really nice ones. Too many to do them all, which is, it's great. I mean, it's lovely that, that we're getting the engagement from you. It's, but there's been some really interesting questions.
Phyllis says, hello from Solihull, just up the road, 40 minutes up the road for me.
Wow.
Green Dragon Reprise says, hello from Chessington.
Oh, wow.
Robert Ingersoll, is that right? Hello from Toronto. Whoopee. Hi there.
Oh.
Secular Tube says, cool. Andrew Armour from Ayrshire. Cheers. Cheers to you. Thanks for doing this, guys. Thanks for and letting us know you're here.
That's great. At risk of being boring, I am going to repeat myself that in case you wonder, sometimes my vague expression is because Mike's got the control room. He's seeing all your comments and everything coming in front of him. I see nothing. I'm just talking with Mike on Skype, and it's being broadcast from his studio. So
I know.
I'm in
Rupert.
About me.
Yeah. Well, you say this every week, and I thought, well, that probably mystifies a few people. So I took a screen grab of when I was preparing earlier, and I posted it to the folks on Patreon. So they have been astonished by what I'm looking at all the time, and now they know why it is that a glazed look comes across my as I'm trying to cope with everything. It's just my poor slow brain sometimes can't cope with the speed of the chat here. That's all.
Yes. So that's a mixed blessing, isn't it? But hey, no, I want the other thing that's going to be significantly different tonight, something that we've never done before. We got a lovely question in. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet, but we got a lovely question in that was sufficiently outside our normal remit. And
it was from Cornelia, if you're here.
Yes, Cornelia, it is you. Normally we would go away and do some research so that we could come back and tell you what we found. But the thing is that we have amongst our, let's say our community, our pals in the archaeological community, and we have a friend, Rick Pettigrew from Oregon. And so we thought we'll get him on. He's going to join us later on so that we can chat about that question. So haven't done that before. Fingers crossed it all works smoothly.
So that'll be happening in about 45 minutes time or an hour's time when we get round to it. Matt's just said that he's getting a bit of an echo from Rupert. I've just turned down my speakers.
I've turned mine down a bit. I've turned you down as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it was a point raised by somebody that was offended on your behalf, Rupert, by me interrupting you. It may seem that way, that I trample right over Rupert sometimes, but because of the time delay between us, being 1,000 miles apart, and there is a slight delay. It makes a huge amount of difference to being able to leap in at the right time. And rather than wearing headphones, we just keep our levels really quiet. So, yeah, it's not perfect, is what I'm saying. Sometimes we get it wrong. So forgive me if I appear to be rude to Rupert. I'm sure he doesn't take too much offence.
You know what? I am impossible to offend. Truly, I am. No, the thing, we could wear headphones, but we also feel that wearing headphones puts us into a kind of studio vibe, which is not the vibe we want to be in when we're essentially chatting with you. It's amazing. It sounds kind of pedantic, but it's amazing how different it makes it feel for us anyway. So.
Yes. So we'll come to the end of the navel gazing in just just a moment. Say hello to Bifton One from Ontario. Nice to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah,
terrific. I just want to mention 2 weeks has gone since the last time, obviously. We have new patrons, people that have joined us as patrons of ours on Patreon. So that's a shout out for James Ribchester, for Grady, Jeff Schroeder, Malcolm A. Douglas, Iona Hart, Claire Obermark, and Paul Warren. Really great to have you on board.
Thank you, folks. Thank you very much.
Your support and vote of confidence. Excuse me. So onward and upward. Just two things more. Couple of things that were published in the last week, actually, was our interview with Vince Gaffney. So glad you liked that. We got really great feedback from that. He's such a great bloke, isn't he? So glad you
I emailed Vince to say that you'd been making these comments, and I actually put into the email. I put like 20 of the comments that I just picked some comments. There have been so many really, really nice things people have been saying. Vince couldn't believe it. He was really touched by all of that. So no, thanks. Thanks, he's a lovely bloke, and his depth of knowledge is just.
Blifton One says you both look as if you've got very intellectual looking backgrounds. I tell you, actually, most of the books behind me are my wife's, to be honest, hand up. I could show you my books to the side.
I can't really show you mine, I don't think. I've got, in actual fact, I've got some down there, but this whole wall over there is just all divided up.
Intellectuals, I think you're mistaking us for somebody else, though.
No house can have
maybe. I don't know. And the film of Arthur Stone. You also seem to have enjoyed that.
A work of art.
I wish I could do loads more of them, and hopefully towards the back end of in the rest of the year, I'll be able to pump out a couple more of those. At least, but thanks for the feedback on that as well. So glad you enjoyed it. Without further ado, Rupert, I think it is time to put that up, which is reminding people to subscribe if they haven't already done so.
Yes, do that. What's that?
Yeah, and where is it? Oh, crikey! There we go. As if we haven't mentioned it enough already that we're on Patreon.
Yes.
Listen, I'll tell you what, I'm going to get the very first question up here, and it is from Derek Whitaker. And Derek asks, whereabouts do you think the Beckhampton Avenue terminated? So, first up, just to be clear, what is the Beckhampton Avenue? Thanks for the question, Derek. That's a great one.
Yes, I hope you're there, Derek. It's the Beckhampton Avenue. Well, it leads to Avebury. I'm saying it leads to, as opposed to from. There are two avenues that come out of Avebury. One is the Beckhampton Avenue, which goes to the west, and then there's the... Yes, is that a hand up?
Well, I'm just going to interrupt you, Rip, because I have a couple of photographs and images, at least, that may help this. I'm going to bring up Stukely's.
Oh, Stukely's Serpent, yes.
Serpent first, which may help you you know, as you're describing it now.
I think whilst it might be a little piece of Stukely's embellishments, you know, you still have to think that Stukely didn't base anything on nothing. So it might be gilding the lily a bit, but you can see nevertheless that the Beckhampton Avenue comes from the west to the Avery complex, and then the Kennet Avenue comes out the other side. Now, the Kennet Avenue leads to the circle known as the Sanctuary, and nobody actually knows where the Beckhampton Avenue led to or from. Depends which way you want to look at it. And again, we have to be careful because we could talk for ages on this. Go on, you're being very polite. Why don't you just interrupt me, same as usual?
Because I'm going to tell you, because it may have an effect on what you want to say, and that is I'm going to bring up the Ordnance Survey map of Avebury, Beckhampton, and of the avenue.
Okay.
Now. Okay.
Well, interesting that the Beckhampton Avenue, as far as we know, where it seems to terminate, there are some stones called the Long Stones.
And I'm zooming into them now.
And do you know what? There are Adam and Eve myths associated with them, but I can't even go there because I think any Christian religion-based thing has got to be thousands of years after these things were actually put up and being used. So to me, that's just, don't even go there. But I think personally, I see this as, you know, you've got people who have been traveling vast distances, and you know that you're getting to this massive place. Mike and I were talking about this the other day, and I was saying that the thing that it reminds me of, for those of you in Britain, you'll know what I mean. Friends in other parts of the world, if you don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about Wembley Stadium, it's the biggest sporting complex probably in Britain, but rock concerts, everything, you know, like any big stadium around the world, multi-use. But the thing is that there is, for want of a better words, an avenue that leads to the stadium, and it's about a mile long. And so when you turn the corner off the main road that runs at the bottom of that, you turn the corner and you look up to this monument in the distance, and it is in the distance, but it's nevertheless this wow when you've turned that corner and there's this thing. And I get that feeling about the Beckhampton Avenue, that there's this thing that now you know you're arriving at Avebury, which is just the biggest of all megalithic pieces of insanity. Is this probably a good time to read folks what we actually asked?
Let me just sort of clarify the map a bit here.
Okay, I can't see what you're seeing, so I'll...
No, so bear with me. So I'm clicking on where Avebury is, and if you follow, you can see my mouse going down. That is the West Kennet Avenue down there, which is currently marked by huge stones. It is probably the most monstrous stone row that there is in these isles, isn't it? And that leads down to, it is said to lead down to the site of the sanctuary, which it says there on the Ordnance Survey. So I'm just going to click over to Google Maps, which is showing you the same. Sorry, I'll try and speak into the microphone. Which is showing you the same kind of area. I'm just going to zoom in on the Adam and Eve stones, and in Google Maps you can see the individual stones there. Now, called the Adam and Eve stones, and they're all that remains of an avenue similar to the West Kennet Avenue, running from Avebury right down to this point. Now, at this point, we can say we don't know where we didn't know where we thought the Beckhampton Avenue ended, but we phoned a friend.
We
Manner of speaking.
we did phone a friend. Yes, we Prof. Tim Darville, Mr. Stonehenge, who a lot of you will have heard us referring to him as Mr. Ubiquity because he's written about everything, and he always seems to be involved in anything, archaeologically speaking. Anyway, so anyway, we asked him because what Tim doesn't know about the Wiltshire complex, well, I don't think there's anything he doesn't know about it. Anyway, he replied to my email saying
no apology needed, Buford. Sorry, carry on, Rupert.
Okay, there was some excavation by Josh Pollard and Mark Gillings a few years back that showed pretty conclusively that the Beckhampton Avenue terminated at the Beckhampton Cove that they found.
Now,
Right.
I'm going to swap back to the Google Maps,
Mhm.
and that large stone there, right in the middle there, is one remaining stone of the Beckhampton Cove.
Right.
Just so we're clear.
Cool.
Okay, I thought I'd just mention that. Carry on, good fellow.
One of the Adam and Eve stones is part of it, but I can't remember which. More interesting is the Kennet Avenue, always thought to terminate at the sanctuary. But that was before all the timber enclosures were found in the valley below. It needs looking at again. But it's possible the sanctuary connects with the timber circle, and the timber circles then connect with Avebury. That would make a very different circulation. Yeah. So basically, Tim Darville is saying that the recent discoveries that have been made at Avebury and in its surrounding landscape could completely overturn what we have been thinking about the landscape up to this point. So, you know,
I'm just going to go back to the map because I want to show what we're talking about as far as the timber palisaded enclosures are concerned. So where my mouse is there, that is Avebury. I'm going to follow the line of West Kennet Avenue down to the A4 there.
I don't want to be picky, but it's only the Kennet Avenue.
Is it the Kennet Avenue?
It is.
All right. So here we've got there's Silbury Hill, just in the top right corner. Down here we've got the West Kennet Long Barrow. People familiar with the area will know exactly what I'm talking about. And here, which has previously been thought to be the termination of the Kennet Avenue, is the monument known as the Sanctuary, spoken of as a stone circle, but majorly more realistically as a timber circle. I think it was both, wasn't it? A timber circle and a stone circle.
Yeah.
But here, if I zoom in just a little bit more, sort of between the two, between West Kennet, Long Barrow, and between the Sanctuary, in this area here where I'm circulating the mouse, is in that field there was several large timber palisades, enclosures, I should say. Very, very significant. I use the word advisedly, monuments, indeed. I hope that's helping. I hope that's clarifying. It's not slowing things down too much.
Well, yes, it's one of those things. Again, it's a subject that we could talk about for a very long time.
Yeah.
But
so the question is, whereabouts do you think the Beckhampton Avenue terminated? And I think, from my point of view, the story are the implications of what Tim Darville has indicated, what current thinking is, that the Beckhampton Avenue terminated at the Cove, at the one of those two stones, added to the fact that it's now thought that the Kennet Avenue may have ended nearer the timber palisades. Springs all sorts of thoughts. And also a couple of things that we've mentioned, and that is, one of those is the Cove. I've just put up a photograph of you, Rupert, standing next to the Avery Cove, very near to the Red Lion pub, more of which later. just to give a sense of scale.
Are you talking about the Avery Cove, or are you talking about the Stanton Drew Cove at the Druids?
No, I'm talking about the Avery Cove.
Okay.
Yeah, which, if you stagger across the road, is in the next field to the...
the enormous one. I'd forgotten those.
The enormous one, yes. Yeah, and there would have been the cove, principally 3 very large stones, providing a rough U-shaped enclosure. There's only 2 still standing at Avery, only 1 still standing at Beckhampton. But I just put that in to help the picture there.
Well done.
There's a picture by Stukely of the Beckhampton Cove.
Right.
I beg his pardon. I don't know whether that's from sight or whether that was from imagination, but in this picture from Stukely, all 3 stones of the cove are standing. I'd forgotten I had that.
Well, it's possible. A lot more stones have been removed since he was, haven't they? So.
Yeah. Sorry, I've been so intent on this. I've been not paying attention to the chat. Monarch says, I dig the Stone Age. Good, you're in the right place here then. Excellent. Do we ever talk about how the stones were erected? Yes, we do. But today, if you've only just joined us, we're only answering questions that folk have asked us in the last 2 weeks in the sort of post box on the community here.
Yes, but you can post it in for a future show if you want. That's always an option.
Anyway, I think we've done quite well. I think Derek, you've done quite well there.
Yes. Yeah, but it was a great question. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving along, a question from Cornish Videos. I'm sorry, we don't have a name for you, but very nice time lapse and static locked off shots of the Cornwall landscape. If you want to visit Cornish Videos on YouTube, but anyway, the point is, Cornish Videos asks, if you could time travel, which place would you visit? And also, you can take one item from 2020 and bring back one piece of information that we don't understand yet.
Yeah.
One of those thought experiments.
Again, lovely question. The thing is that your question was slightly ambiguous. We could take one item back from 2020. I didn't know if you meant take it back and leave it there or whatever, but so I interpreted as we could take one item to help us in bringing something back. So my answer to that would be, well, I would take a camera with me so that I could film stuff, so that I could bring it back and say, see? And do you know what? I'd probably go to Avery.
I probably would too.
Yeah.
Just what was going on there? Because
the thing about Avery, not to bang on about it all night, but the thing is, it's obviously in my mind, in my mind, anything that ridiculously huge is the most excessive example of everything else that would have been going on elsewhere. It's a bit like going to a shopping centre that sells everything you could possibly want is just the most ridiculous manifestation of the corner shop kind of thing, that sort of thing. So I think if you could film what was going on at Avery, it would give you such a good idea of what Neolithic society was like.
Yeah.
In terms of where, though, it's got to be Avery, but then I have to say, Callanish maybe.
Yes. Yeah, that as well. But I think it would still have to be Avery, because I think Avery, I think, is everything would happen there. There would be so many different things going on there that would give you such a different, such a kaleidoscopic picture of what folk were about. I'll tell you what, answering that question about, and doing a bit of back-end research and looking at the map and being reminded of the timber palisade down there has got me all excited about the whole Avery landscape, probably more than Stonehenge at the moment.
Yeah.
I'd love to do, to really plough through that and get down and dirty with the story of Avebury.
I do agree. I like to think that where the Red Lion pub is now, I like to think that that has always been where the pub was. And even back in the Neolithic, it's where you could go for your beer.
Well, Rupert, what a great segue. Having answered, I think, Cornish video's question, guess whose question comes up next?
It's Lazzy.
It's Lazzy. It's Matt. It's Matt Simpkin. Favourite pub in proximity to sites?
Yeah, this should have been...
Lazzy reckons this is an important question.
Well, he's not wrong, is he? The thing is that this should have been a difficult question to answer, shouldn't it? But it's not, because there are so few.
Yeah.
It's crazy, isn't it? That Mike and I were trying to think, well, okay, there's this one and there's this one, and then there's... And the trouble is that all the towns and cities where you've got loads and loads of pubs, even small towns or big villages, just everything's been built over. They're gone. So the few places where pubs remain, and so we've got two, haven't we? We've got the Druids' Arms at Stanton Drew, which is important because the Cove at Stanton Drew. Oh, well done. The Cove at Stanton Drew is actually in the pub's garden.
There it is. There is the Cove at Stanton Drew, in the garden with the tables with the benches out there. Nobody actually drinking it at the time, but if you want to drink your beer or whatever within 10 feet of a hefty piece of sarsen stone.
Yes.
Is it sarsen actually?
I don't remember.
Like it. That's it's the name of the pub. Name that pub, Rupert.
Druids' Arms.
Well done. Yes, the Druids' Arms, Stanton Drew. Let me get that picture out of the way. There we go.
And apart from the Druids' Arms, there is obviously, I say obviously again, there's the Red Lion pub at Avery, which is actually...
You know, I knew this would happen. You see, we're obviously ignorant. We don't get out enough. That's it. There's loads of suggestions coming in.
Oh, good. I was hoping that people were going to barge in about this and this and this. We will
apparently... Well, David. Hello, David.
Hello, David.
Potter says the Red Lion, the Druids' Arms.
Everybody say hello to David. He's one of our admins. He is a
David's been one of our great supporters forever. So, all hail, all respect. And also near the Hurlers.
Oh, really?
Didn't know. The Hurlers, Crow's Nest, Minions near the Hurlers on Bodmin Moor.
Okay.
That's Matt E, by the way. And Druids' Arms near the Nine Stones Close. Ain't bad.
Okay.
Nine Stones. Oh, yes, that makes kind of sense. But it's interesting. I was saying this to Rupert. I don't know if this is what you just said, but in kind of reverse. By the time you get out into the countryside, and you're visiting a monument, that they're usually so far away from the next village. By the time you've travelled far enough in one direction to get to a pub, you might as well have travelled in the other direction. So particular pubs that are associated particularly with a particular site, few and far between. Sure, there are pubs adjacent. Carry on, sorry.
No, it's all right. Don't apologise. We will be compiling these comments so that we are clued up on a few more pubs.
Fair enough, yeah.
Because I have to say, to be brutally honest, I'm pretty sure that another reason that we are not clued up about a lot of pubs in certain parts of the British Isles and Ireland is because sometimes we would get somewhere for a dawn shoot, and we'd be shooting until 10 in the morning and then be back in the vehicles to get off to be filming somewhere else, which was not really the sort of time of day when you'd be hunting out a pub for...
Yeah. I mean, if you'd been following us and making a documentary about the making of Standing with Stones, you'd have been sorely disappointed about the amount of beer we drank.
Yeah.
And the amount of curries we had.
This is true.
We failed.
Yeah.
Except at Stornoway. The only one curry we had was at Stornoway.
Yeah, it was.
On Lewis.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to getting back there next year.
Do you know, I have to, this is something I do have to mention, though, that one place I do associate with a particular site, and I'm talking about Tomb of the Eagles and what's called the
Yes.
Banks's tomb, or whatever it is, Tomb of the
Tomb of the
Otters.
Eagles. Tomb of the Otters.
Which I'm going to bring up a map of South Ronaldsay.
Right.
And you can see in the middle, that red dot, it is called Skerry's Bistro. And it is walking distance from the Tomb of the Eagles.
Yeah.
If I zoom out on Google Maps, and it catches up with me, there we go. You can see where in the world.
It's cracking.
It is. Yeah. But what was lovely about Skerry's was being in the company of like-minded people. Let me see. This is what it looks like. No, honestly, that's what it looks like. Out there on that coast. So you're sitting there and you're looking out over the sea and you're looking way back to Scotland to John O'Groats from there. And here's a pic. Some people you'll recognise. Well, the person standing with his back to us is Rupert himself. And facing him in the middle of the three gents on the other side of the table is our special guest later on, Rick Pettigrew.
Yes. Top man.
I'm saying this because I'm not a seafood lover, but the sorry about that. The scallops that I had there were just completely sublime, and one of those culinary cuisine experiences that you don't forget.
It was.
Those pictures were taken on the Archaeology Channel tour last year, by the way, which unfortunately we won't be doing this year. But more of that later.
Yes.
I think that's enough of pubs for the time being. Some people may disagree, but moving on. Diorman Roby. Thanks, Diorman, for your questions each time.
Yeah.
Oh, you're there. Hi there. What known lithic structure that you haven't been to yet would you most like to visit?
Mm-hmm. I've got one obvious and one not so obvious.
Yeah.
And I would like to go and visit Göbekli Tepe because I want to go there with my cynic's hat on and really analyze it to my own satisfaction rather than there's this this is not me being grouchy. It's the predictable thing of people always talk about temples, and I really want to go there, stand there on the ground and see if I actually agree with that or not. Important buildings don't have to be temples, even though they can be. It's just the lazy go-to answer. The other places is there's a lot of newly discovered stone structures across the Sahara Desert, loads of them.
Oh my goodness.
Hundreds. Which they're thought to be, well, there's contention, but kites, so possibly animal traps.
KITES, as in kites, yes.
Yes. So probably animal traps.
Just so you know, Rupert, James Bagby says, all hail the cynical hat. I'm doing the gesticulation for him.
Yeah, I do wear it a lot. It's true, but no, there's hundreds of these things have been found across the Sahara, and true to form, a lot of the British archaeologists who went and had a look said, "Oh, ritual," and all the Middle Eastern archaeologists and other people who came from, where were they from? I think there was some from Turkey, can't remember off the top of my head, but they all said, "Oh, animal traps." The British archaeologists said, "Oh, ritual." That speaks volumes, really, doesn't it? But again, I would love to go to these things that there's nothing impressive about them, at all. It's just this thing. There's so many of them that they have to have been functional, and that is always so much more interesting when you've got something that it screams at you. No, this is function, nothing lavish. It's there to do a job, and that makes it culturally important, way more important than a temple, if you see what I mean.
Actually, you know what I mean. From our point of view, certainly from my point of view, James makes a good point. He just says Brodgar, because when we were up there, when we filmed Standing with Stones, the excavations at Brodgar had not begun.
That's true.
There weren't even a twinkle in somebody's eye at that time. But the revelations that have occurred, I'd love to, get on the dig, and visit the dig, talk to Nick Card and all that.
Yeah.
Which last time we were up there, the dig was over, so we couldn't actually visit that. But interestingly enough, we talked about this earlier, and I can't remember what I came up with, but I've changed my mind rather whimsically. At this this is a whimsical thing. It's just for this moment in time, because I hadn't really appreciated them before, and that is some of the giants' tombs on Sardinia.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
They are huge.
They are huge.
They're like long barrows, but 10 times the size. And I'm thinking,
what's going on? What's going on?
Oh. And I didn't something I didn't realize before.
Yeah.
And the connections between the trade up and down the Atlantic seaboard and the early Neolithic has been linked to Sardinia, and you just wonder who was influencing who in terms of the huge tombs of Brittany and northwest France and all the rest of it. There are so many echoes in the forecourts of those tombs, though magnified so many times, and the huge stones and the tapering long barrowish look of a lot of them knocked out. So I would quite like to go there.
Okay, that's a good one. I wasn't expecting that.
No, me neither. Okay, thank you, Dorman. Sibylla.
Hello,
Hi, Sibylla. I know you're there. I've seen you commenting and holding things together there. Here we go. So what do you think makes so many people believe that information on prehistory is being deliberately hidden from them? I have to say, Sibylla expounded upon that, that basic question somewhat, but I think we know where Sibylla's coming from.
Yes. Yes. There's a sad answer to that, and it's that there is a mentality amongst some people where they much prefer the magical side of things. They would rather that than to any actual solution, however wonderful the solution might be. And I mean, the whole conspiracy theorist thing, pick a subject, it doesn't matter. But the whole thing about what do you think? In fact, somebody commented in a completely different comment, unrelated comment to me personally recently, was about this, the conspiracy stuff, and that information was being withheld. And I had to reply saying, but what information do you think is being withheld? And what do you think would be achieved by it? So there's it's like people who believe that that the human race came from outer space, and because even if you could prove that, so what? How does that change our history? Not our prehistory or anything else. How does it change who we are and what we are? The fact that, it would tell you that there's life in outer space. Okay, and the thing is, what do you think could possibly be achieved by withholding that information? And the straight answer is nothing. Absolutely nothing. There is no possible reason for withholding information from prehistory. Like these bonkers people all over the internet who show you these dreadful photoshopped images of the giant skulls from such and such. Give me strength. And of course, the trouble is that people who don't recognize a photoshopped image, And there's no reason that you would if you don't use photo manipulation and stuff. Excuse me. But it's the fact that people can be so easily convinced if they actually want the magical side of things to be true. And
I think there's an aspect of laziness to it. It is far easier to take in a story that's, wrapped up in a parcel, and neat and tidy, because the truth is that this stuff is messy.
Yes.
Archaeology is messy. Prehistory is messy. There is so much information that it is utterly bonkers to moot the idea that stuff is being hidden. There is so much information. We're because we do the research. We do the research.
We do
because
that.
we're open to. We look for stuff. We're overwhelmed by the amount of information that comes in from different quarters. That is data. That are facts, not merely people's opinions about prehistory and what people are up to, but the stuff that's coming in from genetics and just simple stuff that gets dug up in places that it shouldn't be dug up. When that happens, we know about it.
Yeah. See, I think it's also worth pointing out, because one of the other things that I think Sibylla mentioned in her question was she mentioned forbidden archaeology, didn't she?
Yes, she did. Sorry.
Which and I still can't remember the guy's name who wrote it. He's a well-known bloke. But this aspect of forbidden archaeology where there are all sorts of artifacts that show that there has been civilization on the planet for millions and millions and millions and millions of years. And the thing is that every single one, there are one or two that are a bit weird. That doesn't mean that they can't be explained, it just means not quite sure how. But 90% of them, more than 90% of them, can be easily explained if you have a better understanding of geology, or in fact principally geology, to be fair. And there are a few that annoy me. One in particular, the most famous one of all that you often see all over the place, is this hammer, a coal miner's hammer that is encased in stone. And so the argument is that this...
Buford says Michael Cremo, he thinks. Michael Cremo.
Done. Well
absolutely
done.
Spot on.
Michael
Thank
Cremo.
you.
Well done. But it shows this stone, this hammer that's actually encased in stone, thereby proving that that the hammer must have been there for the however many million years, that this strata was found. Not true. There are all sorts of geological situations, put it that way, where things can happen. So this was actually encased in ironstone, which is where there's it's like runny clayey soil where a heavy iron is running through it, that over not even that long at all, when all the water has evaporated out of it, you're left with this rock. And I actually took a photograph a few years ago of I was down in Devon on the Jurassic coast is what they call it, but there's a lot of green marl down there. Now marl is a limey clay. There's not enough lime in it to turn it into a limestone, but there's too much for it to be a kind of smooth clay, and it seeps so slowly you can't see it seeping, but over time it just seeps. And I was walking along the beach where this outcrop comes down and meets the beach, and there was a rubbish bag, a black rubbish sack that had just been engulfed over, I don't know, probably less than a year, of just this ooze. It looks like rock, but it's just this ooze that was engulfing this thing. Now, exactly the same as the hammer, that in not very long, the water will have evaporated. That will be a bag of rubbish encased in rock that includes within it shark's teeth from 300 million years ago, all sorts of fossils that are in there. And it just jumbles the whole thing up, and people need to understand that.
And I just wanted to mention this, but before we finished with this, is that Archaeoastronomy Database, I don't know your real name, I probably do, but I've forgotten it, forgive me, says like the petrified wood in Bryn Celli Ddu. So we don't want to appear hypocritical on this point. I think that absolutely makes our point, that we said what we found, how it occurred to us, but that didn't stop us keeping applying our critical thinking to the problem and asking the questions of people until it finally got solved. And of course, it wasn't a piece of petrol.
Well, I don't think you even need to say of course, because it could be.
Yeah.
But the reality is, we carried on going until we actually had an explanation, which we then published immediately. It's that thing of always go for the truth, because if you're just going to go with fantasy, which these conspiracy theorists do, then what have you got? Make anything up, because nothing matters. If that's your attitude, nothing matters at all. Make any old crap up. Sorry, I take the renty hat off.
I thought that might happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've answered Sibylla's question. What do you think makes so people believe? I would put it down to one word. It's wanting to have a story, but being lazy. Not wanting to go down, absorb what you need to absorb to be able to synthesize, alongside, what other people are saying, and accept their reasoning, because you have to understand the reasoning. And lack of trust. I think that's the thing that I really wanted to come on, is the problem that we all must fight against, and that is the degradation in the trust that people have in academia and in science and all the rest of it. I don't know, what happened in schools so many years ago, that an appreciation of the scientific process got eroded or misunderstood or something like that, as if science was a belief system. It is not. It's a process. These kinds of arguments, and I think if we want to proceed on a basis of truth and knowledge, then it's important that people understand how we acquire knowledge. And that's by, testing things out. Falsifying things. You proceed by debunking things to extract what works and what does not.
That's such an important point. The whole essence of science is that you seek to falsify your own theory, because if you can find something that contradicts it, then you're wrong.
It's out the window.
And that is exactly what religion does not do. For example, you start with the premise of, well, you know what happened, and so now we don't need to look any further. And if your answer is always God did it, then you obviously don't need to look any further. The fact that in this day and age there is still a flat Earth society, I find utterly bewildering when just the barest common sense tells you that it's not so. And yet people will still jump through all sorts of intellectual hoops to maintain that belief. It's just odd.
Yeah. It is a question that speaks to so many of the weird and wonderful problems that we're seeing in the world today, of a political nature and all sorts. And on that cheery note,
yes,
just keep on doing what you're doing, folks. We'll keep on doing what we're doing. And,
we will. Yes.
Keep the flag flying. All right. I'm just going to check in with Rupert that it is now 10 to 9, and we have how many?
Right.
1, 2, 3 questions before we get to the question we want to address to Rick.
Well, some of them can be rapidly not disrespectful.
Oh, I'll tell you what. Let's answer Ty's question, and because It's a quick answer, I think.
Yes.
Ty Bashiri asks, Bronze Age Beaker people were from the Eurasian steppe and Neolithic farmers from the Aegean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Were Mesolithic hunter-gatherers simply descended from the earliest immigrants of Doggerland, or were there other major influxes during the Mesolithic? And I confess I haven't done any sort of deep dive or really looked into the background or what if there is an answer to the question. But on the face of it, it's a difficult one because of DNA. Yeah.
Yes. It's an interesting one, but there isn't a long answer, to be honest,
No.
Ty, because the Neolithic farmers in Britain, they weren't just from the Aegean. I mean, there's a complicated mix actually that shows they came from Northern Europe, Spain. It's a mix.
It's all to do with what was going on up and down the Atlantic seaboard and in France.
Yes.
Northeast France.
But the thing is, because your question goes more specifically to the Mesolithic, the reality is that at this stage, we just don't know. And it'll be interesting to see because if you've actually watched Vince Gaffney's interview, he's talking a lot about Doggerland and the research that's coming out of that, and he's got work on Doggerland, and it's going to be really interesting to see what does come out of that. So I would like to be able to say that at some point in the future, and it's not going to be next week on that sort of work, but certainly in the next few years, I reckon we might be able to come back and give you a nicer answer to that question.
Yeah. Because the thing is, we're blessed as far as the Neolithic folk and Bronze Age folk are concerned, because they made the effort and put people entombed them, enshrined them.
It's a very good point, Michael.
So that the bones are there to conduct the DNA and strontium, and the teeth are there to conduct strontium analysis on. So the kinds of answers that you want from this question are there. They weren't doing that in the Mesolithic. They weren't easily. Human remains are. I can't think. Yeah. I mean, even at Starkar, there's nothing.
No.
That can be analysed from a DNA point of view. And don't forget, of course, I mean, Doggerland, yes, but Doggerland's still in the margins as far as the greater landscape of Europe is concerned. And Britain would have been, or the peninsula we were would have been, right at the extremes.
This is true. The nice thing about Doggerland, though, is that we know it hasn't been built on.
Indeed, true. So I'm sorry. I think we should move on because we can't really debate that too much further. But I think the answer to that is encapsulated in a few points.
If we do find out something, Ty, we will tell you.
As far as we know, anyway. As far as we know. So the same question persists, Rupert. Shall we get Rick in because he is expecting our call?
Yeah, go on.
Round about now. So the question is from Cornelia Adelson, and thank you, Cornelia. I hope you're there. Is what language did the people of the Neolithic and Bronze Age speak? Right. Now then, if you say a few words, I shall attempt now to go away and get Rick.
With tech. Because the reality is that, and I'm sure Cornelia knows this, the reality is that in itself is unknowable. Because you only have to go back through recent centuries. If you went back to medieval England, you would barely understand a word. Mr. Pettigrew, Dr. Pettigrew.
Well done indeed. Hang about the three of us in a row. I'm just going to get us up in a threesome, in a triptych.
Yes. I'm warning you, I've been watching.
Oh dear.
It's a wonderful triptych that spreads across the continents.
Well, you will know then, Rick. You will know that I was just telling people what we didn't know about Neolithic and Bronze Age language, and what I was just going to say was that because this is outside our remit, and I mentioned this at the top of the show, that we thought, well, we know a man who does know, or who knows what there is to be known anyway.
Rick, would you say a few words about yourself, who you are, what you do, and how you come to know us too?
Oh, okay. I'll try to put that in very few words. So I'm an archaeologist, have been for a long time, almost 50 years. Then I became a nonprofit media guy. My organization started a film festival. You guys submitted a wonderful film, Standing with Stones, for our 2010 edition of the festival. And you guys turned me on to the wonderful Neolithic monuments of the British Isles.
Wow.
And, we started a tour program 3 years ago. And one of the first thoughts of mine was, hey, these guys know all about these places in the British Isles that I'd love to see. So maybe other people would like to go too. So then the three of us conspired together, and we put together the tour, and we went and did it, right? Yeah. And we're going to do it again.
Here we are.
Yeah, terrific. And tell the folk where exactly in the world you are now, Rick.
Okay, I'm in this little place which is kind of like the Garden of Eden over here on the west coast of North America, in Oregon, Eugene, Oregon, in the west central part of Oregon, the green part of Oregon. And it's a beautiful sunny day. We've had a fantastic, very comfortable sunny summer, and it continues.
Terrific.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful surprise to us, with our acquaintance and being on tour together and our chats, to find out that you knew quite a bit about language in the past, the prehistory of language, if you like. So yeah, it's a. Did you hear the question directly? It comes from a lady called Cornelia Adelson, and I don't know if she's with us tonight. And the question is, what language did the people of the Neolithic and Bronze Age speak?
Well,
how could we possibly know?
This is very difficult because, of course, our knowledge of languages from that far back is essentially nil. And we have to make inferences based on what we do know. First of all, it's very unlikely that there was one language that was spoken. All over the world, people speak many different languages, and any given region will have multiple languages. So it's likely that wherever you were, there were multiple languages within a few days' walk. And what language that would be, I think you'd probably have to answer that in terms of what language family might have belonged to. You also need to consider, how would we know?
Yeah.
The language family that I'm most familiar with is Indo-European language group, which is the language group that probably has the most, historically the most research done on it, and most literature on it. That group, of course, comprises many, many hundreds of languages. We know something about its history because we can connect it with archaeological data as well as literature, texts, actual texts. The oldest Indo-European language that we really have any solid data on is Hittite from Anatolia, going back to about 1500 BC. In literature from adjacent people of Mesopotamia, we have words from Hittite. That's the earliest we have. So if you want to go back to, say, the British Isles, and I think was the question here focused primarily on the British Isles?
I assume so.
But I'd presume so, yes.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Yeah. Certainly Europe.
Right. Yeah.
Me too.
Okay, we can say something about the arrival of Indo-European languages in the British Isles. And then we can ask the question, okay, who were the people that were there before them, right? Yeah. We can probably say that the Indo-European languages arrived approximately in the early Bronze Age in the British Isles. Were the first speakers, were they Celtic? it seems possible that they were Celtic. We can't say absolutely for sure, but of course that is the westernmost group of the Indo-European languages, so it seems logical there may have been a connection there. As to who was there before, well, now that's a very difficult issue. There's quite a literature now on the possibilities of who were the speakers, who were the language, what languages were spoken by the Neolithic farmers of Western Europe in general. Okay.
Yeah.
The best connection that we have, of course, is the existing language of Basque.
Mm-hmm.
And it is widely thought that Basque is descended from the language that was spoken by Neolithic farmers in Western Europe. There are other relatives of Basque. In fact, that we know a precursor to Basque, which is from classical literature of Greek and Latin, is called Aquitanian. Aquitanian was spoken in southern France and northern Spain, and probably was ancestral to modern Basque. There are other languages around that same time. Iberian is another language group that is known about in Spain, in the Iberian Peninsula, in various parts of the Iberian Peninsula, which probably is an early language which is pre-Indo-European.
Yeah.
Okay. There are others in southern Iberia. There's a language called Tartessian,
Oh, really?
which is known again from early literature references in Greek and also by the Carthaginians and Phoenicians.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
the Carthaginians and the Phoenicians settled in southern Spain, in the first half of the first millennium BC. And the Carthaginians followed them, and they were in contact with the native people of the Iberian Peninsula. And so we have a little bit of just a few words from early languages there. So we have some idea about that. We also have evidence of early languages, probably pre-Indo-European languages from Italy and from the Balkan Peninsula and so forth. But we don't know very much about them. Now, here's an important point. We know about these languages because of literate sources, text sources. So when you get to a time period before there was writing, then you can only make some guesses based on the pattern that existed at the earliest moment in history that we know about,
Mm-hmm.
right? And one thing is clear, that there are many, many languages that we will never know about.
Yeah.
Because throughout the course of human history, there have been many, many language extinctions. And that's the pattern that goes back as far as we can see. And even it's happening today. Language extinction is happening at a rapid rate all around the world today, because languages dominate. Dominant groups come in and their languages become the predominant language, and the previous language is spoken less and less. We see this happening all over. It's happened in the British Isles, of course.
Yeah.
Cornish, for example, is a good example of that. But that, of course, we know that was a Celtic language. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying that we don't really know, but we can make some guesses about who they might have been related to.
Yeah.
There's no literature of the time, and in the absence of some long-lost library that perhaps might be discovered, we really don't know. And
just if you want your ego massaged a bit, I mean, thank you for that. That's perfect. And people are really loving the fact that you're here and able to give us this, Rick. Diane Spears says this guy is great.
Ah, well,
he is great. Diane.
Take it from Diane.
He is great. We wouldn't have asked him on if he wasn't great.
Yeah. So everybody's very busy listening to you there. Yeah, excellent.
It is. Can I ask you, Rick?
What question? Sorry, Rupert.
That's all right. Yeah, because you've mentioned, and we talked about this before a little bit, but that Basque is the oldest, or we think it's one of the oldest languages that we have in Europe. Yes, or it's the oldest we have in Europe. So, because we know that certainly, the Neolithic culture, the megalithic building culture that came up from Northern Europe, and that went into Spain and then came back up again along the western seaboard when all that sort of movement was getting complicated. Do you think there is the possibility that we had Basque, the same roots as Basque language? Do you think we were speaking that in Britain as well?
It's very possible, but I wouldn't use the term Basque because Basque is a modern language.
That's modern, yeah.
Languages always evolve; they mutate over time. So, and that's why the term Aquitanian is used for the earliest known language of southern France and northern Spain. There clearly is a historical connection between Aquitanian and Basque. So if we're talking about an early language that might have been spoken in the British Isles, I think Aquitanian probably is a better term for it. Although even further, if you go further back, I mean, that's only 2,000 years ago, right? So let's go back 4,000 years. Well, we're going to see similar patterns of language change and language divergence. Before the Indo-European invasion of the Bronze Age, there probably were many languages spoken in Western Europe, including in the British Isles, of which we would know nothing. But we know that there must have been, and before that, I mean, presumably Basque and other languages of that ilk came in with the first farmers, sometime between 9,000 and 6,000 BC, something like that. We really don't know much about their languages, nor do we know anything whatsoever about the languages of the people that preceded them. Right? We've got the hunter-gatherers, of the early Mesolithic or Paleolithic, going back in time, and let's really go back in time. We really believe that people have spoken language for a long time, at least tens of thousands of years.
Yes.
Probably certainly going back at least to 100,000 years. Because we have evidence of humans spreading across the world with culture very, comparable to ours, solving problems in a similar way to the way we do, through human cooperation and so forth. It requires very precise communication. Yeah. And we even have, of course, early artworks going back 40,000 or more years, which clearly represent the kind of conceptualization that would accompany language. So when you farther back in time you go, the more mysterious it becomes. But it's clear that there is much that has happened in the way of language that we will never know about.
Yeah. I'm fascinated. I'm wary of the time, but it's such a deep subject that so much an extraordinary amount can be passed from about language. Similar to the way that genes are sequenced. You do genetic sequencing. You can get an idea. If you compare words from all over, you can get an idea about when in the sequence they were inserted into the language.
Right. Yeah,
do you know what I mean? I'm trying to get I appreciate that, but at the same time, I'm trying to get my head around it because that sounds like magic.
We call it glottochronology, right?
Yes.
It's basically a statistical analysis of vocabulary and words. It's certainly not a perfect measure, but it is a useful measure. Language, words can be introduced into languages from other languages, so that tends to mess things up, from glottochronological standpoint. Nevertheless, we can get a general idea of how long the languages have been separated, So, between English and German, for example, or between the Germanic languages and Norse languages, maybe on the order of 2,000 years. And you can use glottochronology for that. But once you get back to the point where you don't know what the actual relationships are, then glottochronology fails. You don't really know if you can really apply it.
Right. It is such a fascinating subject. It really is. The thing that I find really intoxicating is when, you can tell from cultural aspects that language must have been in place. That there are certain things culturally shared. Even things like jewelry, for example, you're not going to have a culture that makes jewelry that doesn't actually communicate orally. It's just not going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
And so if you then look at things like, the Denisovans were making some beautiful jewelry. We know that 50,000, 70,000 years ago. And we know that they were into breeding with Neanderthals and with humans, which means that clearly there was communication going on between these different species of hominin or different subspecies. And that again, it just makes such an unbelievable potential for language across subspecies. I find that quite intoxicating. I really do. Yeah. Is this an active part of your research, or just or something?
Not really. Not really. I don't do active research in that area, but linguistics is a very important element of archaeological analysis, because we like to combine all different sources of information to address questions, right? They're classic questions, such as what happened in the Bronze Age, who were these people, when did they arrive, who were they? And you can apply direct archaeological data as from excavations and so forth, but it has a lot more power when you combine it with other kinds of data, such as genetic data and linguistic data.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to go AWOL for a moment there to boot a couple of idiots off the chat.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, I do believe it's a fascinating topic. I think there's more to be learned. There's still active research going on, for example, with regard to Tartessian, as I mentioned. Some people are actively studying the texts. They're compiling the texts and analyzing them statistically and so forth.
Wow.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rick.
So glad we got you on.
So much you've packed in an awful lot there brilliantly in a relatively short space of time. So we're really, really grateful. So glad we could do this and get you on as well. It's terrific. We've set a precedent now for.
Do it again.
Call me anytime.
Yeah, no problem. Do you want to stick around? We've got a couple of other questions that are lined up for us to tackle tonight. Sure. So you're welcome to stick around. I'm just going to split the screen a bit so I can get this on. I'm going to jump to Ross's question, Rupert. And this is the one Ross asked. It may be because he watched the Dolmens of the Languedoc show, the film. I don't know. But the question is, why hasn't there been any kind of concerted effort to maintain the dolmens of France and Spain as there has been in the UK? Which is a fabulous question. And we could take quite a long time answering this. We'll try and... not dwell on it too much.
No, I'll be concise. I mean, the thing is that culturally, it can't be ignored that culturally there is a thing in Britain that we are kind of obsessed with our history because it's so rich, and consequently we have, we're proud of our kind of academic aspects of, you can go and study archaeology in so many parts of Britain. Not the case in France, and I'm pretty sure it's not the case in Spain. Now, if you factor into that the fact that France is nearly 3 times the size of Britain with the same size population. So people are very spread out. You've got the concentrations of people in cities, and then once you get into rural parts of the country, you're just in the middle of nowhere. I live in the Ode here. My nearest neighbour is a quarter of a mile away. It's heaven. But consequently, you've got this sort of rolling farmland going into mountains and hills and what have you, where if you've seen the film we made of the dolmens of the Languedoc, you can see that there are entire necropoli. So not ridiculous amounts of dolmens that nobody has even hunted them out. There's no attempt to remove any of the overgrowth or forestation. They are just left there because they're a part of the landscape. And in Britain, by contrast, things are either protected or they're broken down for building. So you've got towns and cities over the top of ancient sites. In France, because there is so much more land for the population, that's not the case. It's farmland. And once you get up into the hills and rugged bits that are useless for farmland, they're just left and ignored. The same applies in Spain. You go up into the Pyrenees, and there are some beautiful sites that are utterly ignored. It's far too much of a problem to take teams of archaeologists up into the mountains to do any excavation work. Not going to happen. And it's not farmland either. So these places are just left totally ignored. The flip side of all of that is that in Spain and in France, the real show sites, and by that I mean the flamboyant sites that were clearly put there for important hierarchical societies. So where it was the, for want of a better terminology, the kings and queens who were buried maybe. Those sites are really preserved and maintained, and so. Again, in the film we made down here, the Dolmens of the Languedoc, we showed you the Dolmen de Spadas, that enormous passage grave north of Carcassonne, which is the biggest in southern France. It's a breathtaking sight, and in the middle of nowhere. And in Spain, you've got, if you go further down south, you've got El Romeral. Google it. El Romeral is, I can't actually off the top of my head remember the name for that style of tomb building. I should know because I've written about it. But anyway, the thing is that they are huge sites. They're on not as big as, but similar to Newgrange in their way, these enormous chambered tombs with the megaliths inside them. So, from the outside, you're looking at a mound. Inside, you've got 40-ton lumps of stone that are made to construct the place. So it's not true that nothing is maintained. It's just that they only maintain the ones that are, in their eyes, worth maintaining, or the sites that are too important to ignore. If it's a dolmen or a little stone circle, it's just left alone.
Just one moment, guys. I'll be with you in a second.
Oh.
No, I'm just...
oh, are you trying to find something? Yeah, it's... we have the luxury...
Removing something. My take on this is that it's very much a cultural thing. And whether or not people pay attention to ancient monuments or anything really is a question of interest, and there has to be a public consciousness in place in order for people to have the will to spend the money to do the act of preservation or do the excavation, etc. And I think the two things in this country that help it stand out, and that is the John Aubrey, William Stukeley, and the other antiquarians of the 18th, 19th century, who raised general public awareness and published about our ancient monuments, and were incredibly proactive in preserving what we've got. Stukeley, in particular, picked fights with people that were, at Avery that were taking stones away. Picked fights with the owner of not the Red Lion, it was something like Hare and Hounds, I think it was. The owner of the Hare and Hounds was actively destroying the stones of Avery and taking away and doing that. And it was William Stukeley, sort of, as soon as you create a controversy like that, public awareness goes up. And so that they enter the consciousness as some things that belong. The other thing is the establishment of this. We've got the National Trust, and we've got English Heritage, of course, which have custodianship of a lot of these sites. And I think it's not that the National Trust, although they do, have custodianship of a lot of ancient monuments, they have their main thing is, I think they were mainly established for the preservation of stately homes and so on and so forth. And many of those are in their possession. But it's a simple fact that we have an institution, a charity, that is the National Trust, so raises the level of our awareness of our heritage, which, however old it may be, gives a different, a completely altered or different, unique, I should say, attitude to old things.
Yeah. You're so right, because if you factor into that as well, we've got Historic Environment Scotland. What's the name of the Irish equivalent? I can't remember what it's called in Ireland. Do you remember? Do you remember the name of the one in Ireland? You've got Historic Environment Scotland.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm being distracted by an idiot called Geoffrey Ball, who is one of our nutcase sort of theorists and is just messing with people. I'm just going to talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to make another attempt.
Do you know, another interesting aspect of all of this is that as you come north, and there must be something cultural going on here, but as you come north through France, very little goes on archaeologically until you get significantly into the north, and then suddenly we have this wealth of well-preserved archaeology. I mean, particularly, look at Brittany, you look at Gavrinis, you look at Karnak. There is so much stuff in the north. And, turning it around, coming back down south, it gets progressively less and less and less of preserved sites. They're still there, but much fewer and further between. And it makes me wonder if there's something culturally, if there's something about this society of Northern Europe that, maybe it's, how to say this nicely, because I don't mean this with any disrespect whatsoever, but if you're in rural parts of any country, then farmland is a premium, and to have sites that actually take up your valuable working space, it's an encumbrance. And so it's no surprise really that over the last certainly few hundred years, any stones have just been dragged out of the way so that farmland could be properly used. It's, when you go further into the north where you're getting into commerce and, perhaps more cerebral aspects of earning a living, then there's less reason to be riffing things down because that's not getting in the way of how you work. Maybe that's an aspect, I don't really know, but interesting.
Anyway, I hope that helps settle that question a little bit. So thank you so much, Ross, for the question. It's a really good talking point, and helps get our thinking caps on about why the way things are the way they are.
Tell them I'm busy, Rick.
We're coming up to the last question, and Rick, if well, it's a busy office there,
there's lots going on here.
Archaeology Legacy Institute, it's all kicking off there.
Do you know, I once went to a lecture at the Royal Geographical Society, a lecture by Michael Palin, when he'd come back from one of his big things, he'd been doing the Sahara or whatever. And we're in the middle of this lecture and somebody's mobile phone went off in the audience. And he said he didn't skip a beat. He was in the middle of speaking and this mobile phone went off in the audience. He said, "Oh, can you just tell them I'm busy?" And just carried on. And it was just such a wonderful way of dealing with interruption. Class.
What a pro. Oh, good job. You're here, Rick. You can take part in answering this question. This is the last one of the evening.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
No, we've had Cornelia. Sorry. Yes. No.
Where
Back
are we going?
one, back one, back one.
Where are we going?
Here we go. Yes. Cat B asks, what was one of the most jaw-dropping things you've come across?
Oh, wow.
Yes.
People
Go
ask
on,
me that
Rick. You on
sometimes.
that side of the pond? Go on.
Yeah. Well,
Bring-
okay. There are a number of things that I could refer to. But let me just mention one. I was involved in um, an archaeological project about 30 years ago in Eastern Oregon, on the other side of the Cascade Range. In this area, there was a giant eruption that happened 7,600 years ago by a mountain that we refer to as Mount Mazama, which was the precursor to Crater Lake. You may have heard of Crater Lake, which is a giant caldera in the Oregon Cascades. It's a beautiful place. And crystal clear blue waters, very, very deep. You can see down, something like, I don't know, 80 meters down into the water.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
Anyway, it erupted 7,600 years ago. It sent a plume of ash way up into the stratosphere. Ash landed on the Earth's surface all the way up into northern Alberta, which is, I don't know, a couple thousand miles. I don't know, 1,500 miles, something like that. And it's been found in ocean bottom cores all around the world. Okay, because it went up in the stratosphere and everywhere. But I was excavating at a site in north central Oregon near the little town of Madras, and this was a place It was a proposed natural gas pipeline. That's why we were there. We were investigating a site that might have been impacted by the pipeline construction. I went in there. There was very little known about the place. It didn't look like it was all that important, but we started doing some test excavations with some augers, probing deeply into the ground. And we discovered there was a whole lot of stuff there. And it was really deep. In the end, we explored as deep as 5 meters below the ground surface. And we had a real advantage because the adjacent bluff of rocks was composed of soft rock that easily erodes. And so that surface was being covered constantly by this material eroded off the rock. And so for an archaeologist, that's ideal because you want things to be preserved stratigraphically, right?
Yeah.
You want features to be preserved so they're not disturbed by later people. And we had that in spades. But in our probing, we discovered a pattern. There was a concentration of artifacts in one particular spot. And it looked very interesting to me. So I talked our project manager into giving me a big budget for this site. And we brought in some heavy equipment and we opened up a 10-meter square right over this concentration. We removed 2 meters of overburden from this feature. And we came down onto the Mazama ash, white volcanic ash, which is about maybe 30 centimeters thick at that point.
Wow.
And we opened it up, excavated it, and we discovered that we were on top of a prehistoric house, which was about 7,000 years old.
Wow.
And the floor of the house was white Mazama ash. So, in this part of the world, the early pre-Mazama period is very mysterious because we don't have a lot of evidence about what people were doing at that time. Clearly, there were people there before, and they must have been severely affected by the eruption. And it's always been a question, well, what happened? What was the environment like? How long did it take before people were able to come back in and re-inhabit the land? Well, here we had a house which was inhabited starting about 600 years after the eruption, which in archaeological time is a very short time. And so it was a unique discovery. Quite fascinating. We excavated the whole thing. It was a pit house, pretty substantial house, and the only one of its kind that anybody knows about that was excavated, that was built at that moment in time, at that period of time, and the only one with a floor that was white volcanic ash.
That's amazing.
The joys of digging in the ground with a trowel.
Right.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's spectacular. Rupert and I were talking between ourselves about what we thought our answers to this question, and of course we both went to our. It had our jaws on the floor at the time when we were in the chamber with it, and that is the what we what looked like a fossilized tree trunk in the chamber at Brinckethley Thee.
Yeah.
But we'll sort of pass that one by. We've sort of done that one a little bit to death. But
yes, although I think it's fair to say though that
yeah.
every reason for that to be the most astonishing thing we'd ever seen. I think that subsequently, we've talked recently about some of the artifacts that we've seen, particularly in the Wiltshire Museum, things that have been found in Britain that came from, wherever. The greenstone axes from the Italian Alps. That when you see something that is, it's however many thousand years old, and yet not only is it in absolutely pristine, like it was made yesterday condition, but clearly the amount of hours that have gone into its fabrication, I always find they stun me into silence. I just stand and stare at them for improbable lengths of time because it says so much in so many different ways.
That's always quite fascinating to imagine the people who made this thing and who had their hands on it before you did. You feel like there's a connection, right?
Yes.
And I think that's a common feeling among people who deal in ancient things.
I've just had a thought, and it's a long time since I was there, and I haven't been since, obviously, and that is Karnak.
Yes.
Talking about the French one?
Like no photograph, no...
French one, yes.
Yeah, you're talking about the French, not the Egyptian.
Oh, the French one, yes, the rose of... the one that's spelt with a C.
What were they thinking?
That could take anybody's breath away. What was I thinking of? Oh, yes. Do you know what? This is an odd thing, and it comes from the Wiltshire Museum as well. It's funny how things, but it takes you a long time for a penny to drop about what it actually means. And it was only because Rick, you were with us in the Wiltshire Museum. And there's a little replica of part of the, it's not little, I mean, it's a replica of a bit of the West Kennet long barrow. And it was the simple fact that West Kennet long barrow was there 1,000 years before Avery got going.
Right.
And it's sort of...
Yeah, it's
that was a jaw on the floor moment. I just didn't appreciate the great tracts of time. It's so easy for us to stand in the Avery landscape and lump it all together. You can see Silbury Hill, you can see up the avenue, as it were, from West Kennet. You can glance over and you're looking at Silbury. You think you lump it all together in your head, but no, that long barrow was there.
I think it's useful to compare time in terms of our perspective from today. So, a 2,000-year span of time during the Neolithic in Britain is a time that you can discuss in terms of many different sites, right? But to think about this, 2,000 years represents the time between us and the height of ancient Rome.
Yeah.
Right. Imagine what's happened in those 2,000 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. It's useful to put that in perspective.
Right. Can I start to bring the evening to a close?
Indeed.
There's a few things to say. Thank you so much for that question, Kat, and I hope our answers were slightly illuminating in a few ways. But there's a few things to say. Sorry, Rupert.
No, I'm just agreeing with you. Yeah, we do hope that they're illuminating in one way or another,
First thing, thank you so much, Rick. And thank you I can't read you out all the comments from the chat here that have been saying, when can we have him back on? When can you do a special interview with Rick? Actually, if you look back through the podcasts, there is an interview with Rick. It was one of the early interviews we did. But you've been a big hit. Mr. Pettigrew.
Well,
tonight.
I'm honored, actually.
And people are most grateful for your appearance here. There was a couple of questions where somebody asked, I can't remember, somebody asked where they can find out more about what you're up to and where to go about that, Rick.
Our website is the Archaeology Channel, which is at archaeologychannel.org.
Okay,
So that's
just
sort of the
scrolling back and I
centerpiece.
can't see who it was asked the question, but if you do a search for the Archaeology Channel,
Right, that's the centerpiece of what we do, and from there you can learn lots about what we do. We have many social media platforms. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and so forth. We have
Michael Darby says Rick deserves Stonehead of the Month. Did we never give you Stonehead of the Month?
That sounds like it should be an honor, but I'm not quite sure.
You'll get a badge anyway.
It is an honor. If we never awarded you Stonehead of the Month, I'm sure you deserve it.
I've been called many things, but probably not that.
That's it. Yeah. It's an elite.
Actually, while we're talking about badges, I know there is quite a few of our patrons here. Yes. Excellent. I owe some people an apology that if you joined during the month of July, you probably still haven't got your badge yet. They're on their way. So my apologies for that. We've been a bit busy with doing this prehistory guys thing. That's
I have one of those badges.
Excuse.
Yeah, I have one of those badges, but I don't wear. I must have mislaid it someplace.
What do you like? Okay.
Yeah. Send me another one.
All right. Anything else you need to say, chaps, before we wrap up? It's been an exciting evening in the chat here, and thank you, folks, for being nice to each other.
I do want to say one thing, and that is that I'm really looking forward to our tour. It's September of 2021, and we still have room, actually. Yeah. And we just added a new participant in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I'm anticipating that we'll have more, and we will reach our limit. So time is of the essence.
No, fabulous. I mean, if people don't know about the tour, sadly, we had such a great time last year, 2019, touring right down from Orkney, right down through the country, and finishing up Avebury and Stonehenge in the last few days. What was it, 2 weeks?
It was incredible fun.
Yeah, couldn't do it again this year, unfortunately, but 2021 is on.
It is
guys.
on. Yes, it's happening.
It's happening.
Yeah, and if you want to find out more about that, you'll find it on the Archaeology channel, actually.
Yeah. You can do that.
That's it.
Yes.
More thank yous coming in for you, Rick, but your head will get too big. So we need to end it there.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's always good to talk to you, Rick. So, yeah, and thank you.
All right.
For being there.
Sorry, Rupert.
No, it's all right. I'm only saying what you're going to say. You just go right on in.
No, it's saying ta-ta to folk and loads of our Patreons here, and I bet you we'll be seeing them again on Thursday night.
We will be seeing, Patreon Live Thursday night, yes.
Yeah, your own special show.
Be there.
All right. With that, it's good night from me.
And it's good night from me, and it's
good afternoon from me.
Till next time,
folks. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.